Maybe Stephen isn't really worried about the children or the bathrooms or even women's powerlifting. Could this all be some kind of projection?
Anyone can watch someone say something about someone else and be like, maybe he's really talking about himself. You keep speaking for him. This is a massive problem. You need to let people speak for themselves more.
He doesn't want to confront new information.
If he doesn't want to confront new information, if he doesn't want to be told that what he thinks is wrong, why is he going out there having conversations? Why does he look like he's going to cry at any second? Because he hasn't shit in 2 days, I think.
That dude is a dude. He is a man, living, dressing, and carrying himself with all the presence and confidence. Manliness isn't something that is handed down by chromosomes. It is not something that's determined by what's in your pants. It is something lived and built through choices, actions, and attitude. And in this case, that trans man has achieved...
He's not a trans man. Please tell me you watched long enough to know that that guy is not a trans man. Please tell me. Please tell me you did like any research whatsoever doing this. No. This is Mind of Steel, Stephen James and the Chamber of Bigotry. Stephen James is also known as Billboard Steve or Sandwich Board Steve. Apparently this person like paid to make this an advert, which is quite strange. Let's see, listen. I've spoken about Sandwich Board Steve extensively. I've watched a whole bunch of different videos of his. I agree with things, I disagree with other things. I had a lot of criticisms for him.
Almost 9 months ago, I made an episode of Mind of Steel titled The Many Unhinged Lies of Stephen James. It was all about this chap, a former fireman and a current nuisance who's reinvented himself as one of those conspiracy theory activists. What struck me then, and continues to be true, wasn't just the nonsense he promotes, it was how confidently and aggressively he acts on these beliefs, despite the many gaps in his knowledge, obvious to everyone other than himself. Back then he was fixated on 5G.
I don't think I'd say he's particularly aggressive either.
I guess he'd been watching a lot of Mark Steele videos, so he began roaming the streets of Stockport, waving an AliExpress EMF meter, declaring the town to be uninhabitable due to electrosmog. And when a crew arrived to install a new 5G mast next to his local pub, Stephen and his wife Sue physically prevented the installation by getting in their way.
I'm not down with this. I don't see the point in any of this.
Can you get back on the other side about you, please?
I need to protect my tea from you. I don't know you're not going to stab us or something.
If you get hurt in here, it isn't us.
Are you saying that they've got the legal right to close this pavement?
The 5G tower eventually got built thanks to the cunning and devious strategy of just turning up on a day when Stephen and Sue weren't drinking in the pub. But Stephen's revenge against the phone company was truly baffling. He designed, printed and distributed an entirely bogus document that purported to be from Stockport Council. It was a pamphlet full of unhinged lies, designed to make people afraid of 5G. And he circulated it around the Stockport area, and one copy got posted through the letterbox of my friend Lewis, who just happens to run the YouTube channel Ringway Manchester.
The bottom is an approved by Stockport Council logo. I've spoken to Stockport Council, and this isn't something they've approved or are involved in. The future world is here. Dear residents, we understand that you may have concerns regarding the new digital 5G mast being erected close to your home. Although we cannot stop the rollout, spelt incorrectly,
Stephen has a YouTube channel. It consists almost entirely of him interrupting people and then staging some kind of confrontation. It was a formula that got him some attention, but perhaps not as much as he craved, which is why he's recently switched to a new target: trans people. But why is he doing this? Why is he investing so much?
Is he targeting trans people?
Much time and energy into these provocations? It could just be standard attention-seeking behaviour, and that would be pretty normal for flirts and conspiracy theorists. But it could also be that Stephen sees this behaviour as a way to attract fellow outsiders and incels to his cause. After all...
Okay, so there's no way that he could be doing it to have conversations about this issue that he has found himself caring about. It's always we've got this option or that option. It's just like the way Casey Montgomery talks about like trans bathrooms. You have to present options that you have come up with that didn't come from him. And anything else is just nonsense. That's not a good faith way of engaging.
There's nothing that right-wing nutters love more than hating on minority groups to make themselves feel brave.
Trans isn't a minority group. There has to be some kind of through line for us to be a minority group. That cannot be gender identity. You can't be a minority group because you call yourself a certain thing. If that is the case, flat earthers, if they refer to themselves as flat earthers, are potentially a minority group. Unless you think that gender and sex are very, very unique in that respect, but that would need justifying.
But as I'll argue in this episode, I think there's a far clearer motivation behind Stephen's antics. He is a devoted, obsessive fan of Harry Potter. He loves Harry Potter in the
Okay, so none of them are the potential. He wants to have conversations about this because he feels strongly about it. The good faith interpretation is off the table from the get-go. How am I supposed to expect a good faith argument from this person?
The adult kind of way. Something that starts as an innocent obsession with a children's fiction franchise, but slowly metastasized into his entire personality. And so that's why our story begins.
His entire personality, you see his videos, you don't see him 24/7. This is like bad faith as fuck.
In Manchester, Piccadilly, near the railway station where, according to popular legend, J.K. Rowling conceived the idea for Harry Potter as she waited for a delayed train to London. That moment of inspiration led to a cultural empire, and that empire inspired Stephen James to launch his own fantasy, the only way he knows how, through public confrontation.
What's the fantasy? The other thing is, how much have we poisoned the well without even showing any of the actual conversations? We're already primed to think the whole thing is bullshit. Maybe he thinks a lot of people are stupid enough to get taken in by these kind of tactics.
Would you like to define
Yeah, rich people are minority.
what a transgender is?
Yes, I would. I'm more than happy to.
Yeah.
So cisgender is when
Like, would this Mind of Steel person accept that trans is like poorly defined?
you are if you're born into a male body and you're a man throughout your entire life, you're cisgender. If you're born into a female body and you're a woman throughout your entire life, then you're cisgender. Transgender is just not cisgender. Do you agree with that definition?
That is the worst definition I've ever heard. Also, everyone is cisgender then. Okay, wow.
I don't think there's such a thing as transgender. I think that it's just a delay.
And I hate this argument, by the way, from Steve. I don't like this argument. I don't think it's a good one. I think clearly transgender means something. It's not well defined. But to say that the definition for something isn't very good is a bit different to saying that it doesn't exist.
Illusion of people's imagination.
Stephen James's placards.
Like, I think just because, like, even my definition of trans, which would be someone that is born one sex, but does what they can to, like, resemble and live as the other sex, bearing in mind you can't change sex or meaningfully know what it is to be the other sex. That's still quite esoteric, but it's still something that you can say exists. Not everything has, like, a hard and fast definition based on, like, innate characteristics. But that's why I kind of also say that I don't think being trans is a minority. That's why I also say that I don't think gender identity is meaningful and stuff like that. But like I said, like, I have a lot of criticisms for Steve. I hope that's clear.
Says that transgender children don't exist. But in the previous clip, we
This is a bad argument as well. They do exist. My argument here is that they ought not to. That there are a lot of reasons why transitioning a child is bad.
just heard him state that transgender people don't exist at all.
Like, unfortunately, what I will say, so far, I think this guy is incredibly bad faith. I do think there is an extent to which Steve kind of opens himself up to this kind of bad faith engagement. Because when it's got something like this, that you can very much easily make a case for, is like false, then that kind of does lead the way. Because what happens is, when you actually listen to him talk about it, there's a little bit more to this than meets the eye, and the actual argument becomes revealed. But I don't know if I even trust that this person's going to try and get to the actual argument. Like, this is the thing. You don't have to take everything everyone says as face value, ultimately. And so I can criticize him for saying that this is a bad way of wording it, but also accept that there's a bit more to the argument than just what appears here. Does that make sense?
And you'd have to be blind not to notice that this is in fact a homage to Stephen James's hero, J.K. Rowling. She's an author now best known.
Okay, he agrees with J.K. Rowling on something, so what? Who do you agree with that's famous? Should I invoke them every time you open your mouth about something? David Tennant. David Tennant thinks children should be transitioned. And I'm assuming you do too. Maybe you don't. I don't know. Should I invoke David Tennant because he's pro-trans every time you talk? I think that's fair to do. So is it fair to do this way? By the way, what are these eyes? Like some Helen Weberly shit. Fucking hell.
For retconning her own canon through increasingly bizarre Pottermore blog posts that consider the revelation that wizards didn't always use toilets, but simply relieved themselves wherever they stood and magicked away the scat. That was an aspect of Rowling's world building that was never mentioned in her books, but proudly delivered years later via her blog.
Yep, she did some weird retconning of things. Dumbledore became gay, shit like that.
Stephen's sandwich board is undergoing a similar sort of post hoc revision. Maybe, like the Wizards of Pottermore, Stephen is also following the Wizard's defecatory strategy in the hope that his own magic powers will make his aroma more tolerable than his opinions.
But I am a transgender child. I was anyway. I'm 18 now.
Right.
I found out when I was 13. My mind has not.
So let's see if this person's like ultimate disagreement with what it says on this billboard is, well, someone else said they were a trans child. The whole point is, you just listen to what people say, you know.
Changed. I know who I am.
You found out when you were 13?
Yeah.
In the previous clip, Stephen was confronted by the very kind of person he claims doesn't exist.
Well, they don't prove that they do exist, though. That's the thing. Potentially his argument still holds, because you'd have to define what a transgender child is. You'd have to define what transgender is. Like, a person can think something doesn't exist, and another person can think a thing exists. That is, in fact, possible.
Transgender child. And perhaps his failure to see that person or accept the reality they...
Accept the reality. There we go. I told you. The person says they are, therefore they are.
Transgender child. And perhaps his failure to see that person or accept the reality they represent suggests that he is
What reality do they represent?
indeed living in a kind of magical world, one in which Stephen's best defence is his own magical thinking. Expecto Patronus. Yes, the Patronus charm, introduced in The Prisoner of Azkaban. It's a spell that produces a spectral guardian to ward off threats. And helpfully, J.K. Rowling has provided a little quiz on her Pottermore blog that allows one to find their own patron.
That's it for that point? Well, this person says they were, so checkmate. That's nothing. The person claims to be trans and was a child at one point. They say they started their transition as a child. That doesn't mean that he has to accept that trans children are a thing. This is just someone saying that that's what they were.
And I took the liberty of filling it out on behalf of Stephen. And the result, you will be surprised to learn, is a giant African land snail. It's sluggish, intransigent, and it's also an invasive species.
Okay, massive tangent for an atom. Really lame.
Shielded by a thick shell that makes it immune to outside influence. That is the perfect emotional defense for Stephen's soft, squishy brain. However, please, nobody tell him that this snail is hermaphroditic. That knowledge might cause his entire magical world to crumble.
You're in Manchester, mate. Do you know how fucking weird this city is? Dickheads like you.
Yeah, like the reasoning so far is terrible. Just because someone says they were a trans kid, that doesn't prove anything. That doesn't actually argue against what he's saying. Of course, people think that they are this. Does that mean that they are? Doesn't it kind of depend how they're like defining any of this stuff?
You can use fictitious pronouns if you want, which aren't grounded in reality.
Right now I'm being me calling you a twat.
Use of pronouns is a form of courtesy. As a thought experiment, what if I chose to refer to Stephen James not as he, which I presume is the preferred pronoun, but instead as it?
Well, that's not a great example, because like it pronouns are seen as discourteous because they're dehumanizing, because you're talking to someone as if they're an object, not a person.
And I might use this to suggest that somebody like Stephen, who is incapable of empathy, doesn't deserve the normal pronouns like he, she, or indeed they. I think Stephen might reasonably find my phrasing offensive. It might even consider me to be rude. It's obviously an expression of contempt. It is a way of belittling it, of signalling that I do not recognise it.
Yeah, so all you've been doing is trying to belittle someone the entire time and not actually engaging any real arguments, for sure.
Personhood, because I find its views repugnant, and also because I hate adults who continue to read children's fiction. Grow up, get a library card, Stephen. That's my point. Even if Stephen James...
This is actually killing me. This is so fucking cringe. I actually want to fucking die listening. I'm so, like, all these, like, ad homs and stuff. Who are you impressing with this?
Doubts the psychological or medical reasoning that might lead someone to transition. Wouldn't basic decency suggest that we refer to people as they ask to be referred to? That's my point. Even if Stephen James doubts the psychological or medical reasoning that might lead someone to transition, wouldn't basic decency suggest that we refer to people as they ask to be referred to?
You're enabling people to, like, control what you're saying. You're enabling people to, like, construct reality for you instead of constructing your own. If you don't think that males can be female and you consider she a female pronoun, then why do you have to, like, go along with what someone wants to be called? Why does it even matter so much to be called as this, that, and the other? You know what I mean? Why don't people have the freedom to speak for themselves.
How would Stephen like it if we all referred to his wife as an inanimate?
Like, why would he give a shit? The thing is, cis people don't ask anyone to call them any pronouns. Nor do lots of trans people, to be fair.
As an inanimate object?
Yeah.
She wanted to identify as a teapot, okay?
Okay,
So should
fine.
you affirm that she should be a teapot?
I said children and adults have the rights to identify as they wish.
Yes, and other people don't have to agree with them, or change the way that they talk, or anything to affirm that if they don't want to.
Yeah, but
Okay.
when my wife was a child, she identified as a teapot.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
I'm sure she actually did. You know, that's just
That's
one of
true.
these.
If you remember Stephen's wife Sue from my previous video about his anti-5G activism, you might be inclined to find this claim that she identifies as a teapot to be a little bit more credible, for the simple reason that the woman also appears to be profoundly unhinged. But without that context, most people would recognise this teapot anecdote as a dishonest attempt to ridicule the idea that someone might
The irony is, I'm pretty sure you get teapots that have hinges on them, but okay. You get the lids that like flip up instead of coming off.
identify as a gender that is different from the one that they were assigned at birth. Now, of course,
What does that even mean, though? Why should anyone take any of that seriously if they don't want to? Isn't that their right? And when it becomes a case of, well, because they don't identify with their own sex, we might need to, like, give them surgery and hormones and stuff.
You, Mary.
When they're too young to understand what's going to happen.
Your pause game is on point today because he looks constipated in every shot.
Thank you so much, Tyler Knox, for the $1. Yeah, he does. Fucking hell.
identifying as a teapot isn't a kind of gender. So, however
So why is gender special in this regard? Why can you identify out of your sex, but you can't identify out of your species or whether you're a person or an object? Why is gender different in this regard?
eccentric Sue might be, the comparison isn't even relevant.
Well, you haven't made a case for why it matters what you identify as. You have your reality, you have your body. Why is it different to identify as an inanimate object than to identify as someone who has a different set of gonads and developed a different way to you that you will never be the same as?
However, if Sue does want...
We're just assuming legitimacy when it comes to gender identity, like most people do, but it's not legitimate. You have to make a case for why it's legitimate, or you can't expect people to see it that way. And therefore, is it a courtesy to call someone something that you don't think they are? Or you're like literally telling people, well, you have to lie now. You have to say what you don't actually think. A lot of ways in which that could be very, very dodgy, very quickly.
us to respect her teapot pronouns, I really don't think it would be that hard to accommodate. We could just refer to her warm,
You actually,
knitted clothing as a cosy, and we'd never under any circumstances pour milk on her before boiling water.
You're a female.
Female biology until I...
That doesn't change the fact that you have female biology. Just
yeah, this is the guy that like pretended to be trans but isn't. Like, I would be amazed if this person was female, to be honest. But I have the knowledge of hindsight.
because I didn't notice, it's very easy to confuse people with your appearance.
From what I can see, that dude is a dude. He is a man living, dressing, and carrying himself with all the presence and confidence of somebody who knows exactly who he is.
Dressing, carrying himself. What does it mean to do any of those things? Do I not look like I dress and carry myself the way that I know who I am when I'm a dude? Why? Because I have long hair? Because I wear slightly feminine clothing? Because I wear makeup?
Is. If manning is a verb, then he is doing it, because manliness isn't something that is handed down by chromosomes. It is not something that's determined by what's in your pants. It is something lived and built through choices, actions, and attitude.
So we're literally pushing stereotypes then. Okay, amazing.
And in this case, that trans man has achieved...
He's not a trans man. Please tell me he watched long enough to know that that guy is not a trans man. Please tell me. Please tell me he did like any research whatsoever doing this. This is worse than the fucking trowel. Watching like 5 minutes of a video and coming to these crazy conclusions. At least the trowel is an excuse that he's like coked up to fuck and like drunk as shit when he's watching this kind of shit. Like, what the fuck is this guy's excuse?
a far greater degree of masculinity than I think Stephen James ever will. Stephen clings to the idea that who you are is dictated solely by your chromosomes, or, since they're too small to see, the contents of your underpants. This is the passive mindset of inert matter. Stephen is saying that we are all incapable of becoming something else, and anybody...
No, he's not saying you're incapable of becoming something else. He presumably is saying a male can't become a female and vice versa, which is true.
who dares to try and transform themselves into whoever it is they feel they ought to be is deluded. Ambition is pointless because...
But what does it mean to think that you ought to be a woman? At that point, you're getting to like religious arguments. At that point, you're getting towards gendered soul arguments. Why does he look like he's going to cry at any second? Because he hasn't shat in 2 days, I think. Hi, Catus Domesticus. Hope you're good.
Stephen is saying that we are all incapable of becoming something else, and anybody who dares to try and transform themselves into whoever it is they feel they ought to be is deluded.
Yeah, when you get rid of the fact that he's broadened this out in a way that is like terrible faith and assumes a whole bunch of stuff that he's not said as far as I can tell, what does it mean that you think you ought to be the other sex? How is there a metric by which a person objectively should have been born the other sex? What does that mean?
Ambition is pointless because change is impossible, and we are all meat.
Reductio ad absurdum. Wow, amazing.
We're not talking about religion, we're talking about gender.
Yes.
Is he gonna realize this guy isn't trans? I really need to see this now.
But they're all social constructs.
Yeah,
religion,
exactly.
politics,
So it's a social construct.
Yes, gender's a social construct.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
my whole point.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my...
Yeah, if gender is a social construct, then why would it trump your sex then? Why would you use that to define yourself and not your sex, when gender refers back to sex anyway?
The whole point is that biology is immutable and feelings don't override facts.
Feelings don't override facts. This is a phrase you'll often hear in right-wing culture war rhetoric, usually delivered with the confidence of somebody who thinks that they have
Okay, why is it wrong though?
just won the debate. The implication is that other people's arguments are based on vague emotions, whilst my worldview is grounded in immutable truth.
Well, the argument is people feel like the other sex, therefore they can become the other sex.
But is Stephen standing on facts? Even if you accept this hardline biological determinist position that
Well, that males and females can't change into each other. No, that is a fact. It is a fact that if you're male, you cannot become female. You cannot take on the other reproductive role. You either have your reproductive role, or you can nullify it. You chop a man's dick off, he's not a woman now, or more of a woman now.
everything about us is shaped by our biology, Stephen's vision reduces the idea of biology to absurd simplicity. He claims that
he's talking about sex, not biology. He's talking about a biological construct. Sex isn't like the be-all and end-all of who you are as a person.
That the sex that you are assigned at birth dictates your gender, that there are only men.
Well, do you have a gender? What even is your gender? Does this person think it's what you think you are? Gender is a social construct, so how can you have a gender? If it's born from outside, which a social construct is necessarily, then how the fuck can one have a gender? Gender is what we all experience.
Men and women, and that is the end of the story. But that's not how human behavior works. Gender...
Well, you can't behave like a man or a woman because that implies... No, in fact, you can behave like a man in one specific instance, when you're having sex. You can behave like a woman in one specific instance, as when you're having sex, when you're trying to reproduce. There's only one thing a man can do in that situation, only one thing a woman can do in that situation. A woman's pegging a man, that's not the same. Because that isn't, like, reproductive.
is how we behave. It's how we understand ourselves and how we men and women, and that is the end of the story. But that's not how human behavior works. Gender is how we behave.
No, it's not. Our behaviors are gendered. Because gender is like stereotypes. It's what is associated with each sex. Your behavior itself isn't your gender. Because if that's the case, if you move to a different country, your gender changes.
It's how we understand ourselves and how we
That doesn't make any sense either. How we understand ourselves.
interact with others. Some people...
This is nonsense. It's not what gender is. Gender is like cultural and social aspects of sex. It's culture born. It only exists because we're a society. There is no innate gender. You do not have a gender. Unless you say it's just the same as sex, in which case you do, and it's your sex.
People born with male bodies behave in very feminine ways, and some people born with female anatomy are deeply masculine. This isn't...
Deeply masculine. that only exists because of like stereotypes.
A delusion, it's an observation. And if
and none of that makes you the other sex. We're saying that, like, here's the thing. This only works if you decide it for yourself. If you tell a woman that she's masculine because she works as a car mechanic, she might not take that very well. That might be the sole masculine trait about her. You know what I mean? So her gender now is like somewhat male because she engages in one masculine pursuit. That doesn't make any sense. Like, this person is unironically actually quite sexist. Your behavior does not say anything innate about you. If a woman wants to play football, she's not like part man, or like her gender isn't like somewhat masculine. If a woman is a lesbian and fucks with other women instead of men and cuts her hair short, her gender isn't masculine necessarily. Her gender isn't like somewhat male, or she isn't like somewhat a man. The only way she can be those things is if she decides it herself. And even then, that doesn't work.
behavior varies, then gender has to exist on a spectrum because gender is behavior.
But gender isn't behavior. If you're a woman and you engage in lots of masculine pursuits, but you see yourself as feminine, then what's your gender? And that's the whole problem. There are disconnects. You might not see your behavior as feminine where someone else might. In another country, the behaviors that in your country are considered feminine might be masculine. So what happens? Does your gender change when you move country, when you go on holiday? This doesn't make any sense. And if gender is a spectrum, why have you been using the terms masculine and feminine? Doesn't that suggest that a behavior is one or the other? Can you quantify which behaviors are like somewhat one and slightly the other? Can you quantify which ones are like literally half and half? Or is that unisex? Is that like saying wearing trousers isn't masculine or feminine, it's unisex? That means both. That means, you know, any sex, and there's two sexes. None of this makes any fucking sense. Where do these fucking idiots think that they can fucking explain this shit?
Stephen isn't defending biology, he is cherry-picking the parts he likes and ignoring the rest.
Like, you're not talking about biology because you're talking about gender. What are you fucking talking about? No, he's still talking about biology. He's placing more emphasis on the biological than the social, than you are. What am I watching?
It's a dishonest misrepresentation of the science intended to make us believe some contradictory ideas. He wants us to believe that transgender people don't exist and that the concept is a delusion. But he also...
Well, he's not saying the people don't exist. He's saying that the concept doesn't exist. And I disagree with him, by the way.
Also claims that liberal media, schools, and somehow TikTok are creating trans kids.
Somehow kids are watching these brightly coloured people with these like cartoonish appearances going on and on about their like fucking gender identities and stuff. And somehow that's making more trans kids. Yeah, somehow. Yeah, wow. Wow, yeah, somehow someone might come to that conclusion. Have you ever watched a fucking queer TikTok?
So which is it? Do they not exist, or are they being converted? The answer is neither.
Like, there is an incoherence in, like, if Steve holds both positions. They do exist. The problem is, they're also kind of deluded on their own existence, ultimately.
Because Stephen's argument isn't really about gender. He doesn't even acknowledge the existence of gender as a concept that could be transitioned. The mere notion, he claims, is liberal.
But what would it mean to transition your gender? The thing is, plenty of TRAs don't even agree with this. Like, how often do you get people saying that it's transphobic to expect a trans woman to act a certain way? Bearing in mind you're saying gender is behavior. That means that trans women have to act a certain way in order to be the other gender? Right?
Liberalism run wild.
Isn't it bad just to think there's two sexes and you can behave how the fuck you want and we shouldn't place, like, beliefs on what different fucking genders, what different behaviors mean relative to your sex? Wouldn't that be better? Like, truthfully, aren't there like very, very few sex-specific behaviors.
Feelings don't override facts, but neither do slogans override science. And the reality is much more
But you haven't shown any of that. And what you've given us isn't science, it's nonsense. That's not what gender is.
complex than Stephen's signboard.
And the thing is, where we do gender behaviors, a lot of the time, that seems inappropriate to me. And I can see why you get these feminists that find that kind of shit oppressive. I can see why completely. I felt the same way. The fact that people have gendered some of my behaviors as like feminine and used that as a reason to like call me gay and like all this other shit. Like that affected me like as a kid, you know what I mean? That kind of thing arguably shouldn't exist. And that's what gender critical feminism is really about.
Or his rhetoric would like to admit.
Him dressing like a boy and going by he pronouns makes him feel happy, so I don't understand why.
Oh, and he didn't get to the part where that supposed trans man reveals himself to not actually be a trans man and just assumes he was a trans man. What an actual retard.
Right. Well, everybody's free to give their opinion.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
But does it affect you directly?
Well, ultimately, it does. It affects everybody.
I mean, it affects everyone. If you're being told, you have to accept a reality that you don't agree with.
I know, but I mean you personally. You're studying in the middle of Market Street. I want to know.
Like, this is not an argument. It doesn't matter. Does it affect you personally? Who fucking cares? What's real? What's correct? What's the truth? Why can't the pursuit of the truth be its own motivation? Because it sure as fuck is for me. And I know it is for a lot of other people on a lot of other subjects. And we don't question it. But when is this? We do question on the grounds of, well, there has to be something in it for you personally. You can't just care about the pursuit of the truth. So you're not supposed to care unless it affects you personally. Some shit worth fighting for, like I got no rights. Well, listen, arguably, especially if you're female, yeah, it does affect you. Because of all these belief systems, you now have to accept men in your spaces. Stuff like that.
Why it affects you so
Okay, I'll tell you if you let me.
Well,
Stephen never actually
Oh, this is so slimy. He doesn't play what Steve actually says. He speaks for him. I don't trust this at all. I hate when people do this so much. I don't trust people when they sum up someone else's position that they already have shown quite clearly that they dislike. So I have no idea how much this actually lines up. Because I don't know if he's even hearing what Steve's fucking trying to say versus what he thinks he's fucking trying to say, based on his preconceived notions of him.
explained how this issue affects him personally. When that teenager asked him directly, he launched into a long and
But it doesn't matter.
evasive monologue, circling the runway for several minutes before finally landing on this. He disagrees with it.
Yeah, the pursuit of the truth.
You're anti-trans.
Thank you so much, Philip Mango, for following. Thank you. Yeah, the pursuit of the truth. Why can't that be its own motivation?
That's it. That is the...
And it's not even just that. He doesn't like that kids are getting medicalized. He doesn't like that women's sports has been, like, filled up with men.
emotional burden he's carrying. He doesn't want to be
None of this matters.
told that something he believes might be wrong. He doesn't want to confront new information.
No, this is... If he doesn't want to confront new information, if he doesn't want to be told that what he thinks is wrong, why is he going out there having conversations? Why isn't he just doing what the rest of you fucking people do? And just make videos and form an echo chamber where we all think the same thing and we don't actually talk to anyone else ever to get their perspectives. If this is what he wants to do, he is going about it in the most retarded fucking way possible.
That's it. That is the emotional burden he's carrying. He doesn't want to be told that something he believes might be wrong. He doesn't want to confront new information that could...
So why is he going out there getting into arguments about this shit? Why is he like talking to people that clearly disagree with him and that are going to expose him to potential new information? You utter dumb fuck. What are you doing? You paid for this to be seen by as many people as possible. What the fuck am I watching?
force him to reassess his cherished beliefs or grow in any meaningful way, because the new information is a threat. Ironically, Stephen wants to be seen as some kind of lone truth teller, like Daniel in the lion's den. He's bravely standing up to the mob with nothing but his convictions and a sandwich board, and he wants you to believe that he has been forced into this role by the overreach of the so-called trans cabal, who are a bunch of gender-bending radicals corrupting children and undermining fairness in sport.
Okay, so you do know what his like objections are then. So you do know what his objections are, you fucking loser.
And he has cast himself as the reluctant hero who is compelled to act because the other side is just that extreme. And he wants us to think that he is a man of tolerance, seeking coexistence. But it's all theatre because he's a man who picks fights with teenagers.
No, he doesn't. He stands in a street and they approach him. He doesn't approach other people. Wait, he paid for what? This guy paid to get this video put out as an advert.
And when those teenagers finally press him on his beliefs, he doesn't even have the courage to speak his own mind.
I agree, you should let people be who they want to be, right? 100%, I agree with that. But as long as what you live in your life doesn't adversely affect anybody else.
Did you notice that we aren't in Manchester anymore? This is Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire, where J.K. Rowling's sister once lived.
Why is this J.K. Rowling thing? Hebden Bridge is woke as fuck. It's the lesbian capital of the country. He's there because he knows that there's a lot of people there that have different beliefs to him. You can make a J.K. Rowling connection fucking anywhere, probably. She's probably been to a lot of different fucking places. I don't know, maybe she's done a book signing in the city that I live in. So maybe my shit is all linked to how much I fucking love J.K. Rowling. By the way, I hated Harry Potter. I read one book and watched 2 movies, and I fucking hated it.
Rowling herself stayed there whilst she was drafting the first Harry Potter book. For a man so fixated on the wizarding world, it makes perfect sense that Stephen would want to trace her footsteps. Perhaps
this is retarded. J.K. Rowling wasn't there to argue about trans people. What the fuck is he talking? What is this connection? It makes no sense.
J.K. grumbled about some minority groups on the very same cobbled streets where he is standing now.
No, she didn't. She wasn't doing any of this kind of shit by then because she was massively famous. If J.K. Rowling showed up on the streets of Hebden Bridge to argue with people, there'd be a fucking massive crowd because J.K. Rowling is fucking famous as fuck. Steve isn't.
Stephen claims that it is okay to be trans as long as it isn't affecting anyone else. But who's defining what it means to be affected?
Well, for example, if you're trying to normalize filling kids up with hormones, when they might just change their minds, when they might realize later on in life that they've sterilized themselves and all this kind of shit, it affects other people who arguably shouldn't be brought in on this. If you're going to say male people should be allowed in women's sports, when males have advantages in almost every sport, then that affects other people. So we're talking about the ideology, not just trans people existing.
Simple disagreement counts as...
Even just expecting people to call someone something is affecting other people, let's be real.
...harm, then the mere existence of a contrary idea is an act of violence. Stephen says that he's just here defining what it means to be affected. And if simple disagreement counts as harm, then the mere existence of a contrary idea is an act of violence.
I don't think anyone's saying that, but okay.
Stephen says that he's just here to have a conversation, though. He claims to stand for freedom.
Yeah, why can't that be the thing? Why can't he just be looking for conversations and he's using his billboard as an advertisement for it? Why can't that be the case? Why can't you engage with that? Accept that that might be his motivation and then just listen to the arguments and critique them like I do. It's not difficult. I actually find tons that I disagree with him on, to be quite honest.
Fairness and the principle of live and let live. But the moment he's asked to extend that same courtesy that he expects from others, he recoils in horror. Take, for example, the word cisgender. It's not an insult, it just means that you are not transgender.
No, it doesn't. It means that you identify with your own sex as assigned at birth, which is redundant and nonsensical. Because sex is not something to identify in or out of. And it also suggests that you're going along with an ideology that you don't believe in.
And that's a word that applies to most people, including Stephen James and also me.
Wait, so now you're saying that you can apply labels to him. But if someone else applies the label of man to a trans woman, that's a problem. Why is it okay to do this one way and not the other? If you're going to say that there's no moral weight behind being cisgender, why is there moral weight behind being a man to some people and a woman to other people? It doesn't really make any sense.
But apparently even that word is just too much for him. Because if Stephen accepts it, then he's acknowledging that there is an opposite, that there are people who aren't like him. And if those people really exist, then maybe his worldview shouldn't be privileged. And I think that's the real threat. It's not the pronouns. It's just the idea that other people's lived experience might be valid.
No, just what are you on, man?
You're a cisgendered man, would I be right?
I don't subscribe to that term,
Are you
cisgender.
male? Are you
Well,
male?
what do you think?
I have no idea. I don't know what's in between your legs. It's what's in between your ears.
Having a real argument means taking a position. You have to offer a view that can be challenged if you want an argument. But Stephen doesn't have a view. He hasn't thought any deeper than the slogan on his sign. When someone tries to meet him in good faith, even just to define terms, he panics. He can't engage with the categories that he doesn't
That is not what we just saw.
control. So instead, he throws those questions back. Would you like to define what transgender is, he asks, even though he is the one.
Bruv, he's saying that he doesn't think it exists. So what definition would he have for something he doesn't think exists? So yes, he probably wants to hear what other people are talking about when they say transgender, especially because there's about 1 million different definitions for what transgender means. And largely they don't make any fucking sense.
One standing in the middle of a city centre making very confident statements about transgender people. And when someone answers, he gives nothing in return. No follow-up, no argument, no perspective. It's just...
He's like very, very carefully choosing clips. At one point, he literally outs himself as having not watched almost any of this because he doesn't even realize the guy from earlier isn't trans. That guy is not trans. He just accepted that he was because he said he was.
Answers. He gives nothing in return.
You keep speaking for him. This is a massive problem. You need to let people speak for themselves more.
No follow-up, no argument, no perspective. It's just a flaccid attempt.
I mean, he's not amazing at debating. I'd agree with that if that's what he's trying to say, but like, that doesn't mean that he never has any points. And you're summing it up from a position of bias, meaning I don't actually trust your summing of what he's saying. This isn't really what I've seen, and I've watched more of his content than this guy has, apparently.
To pivot away from dealing with what's just been said. He just repeats the process again. He tries the same tired talking points on the next passerby.
What's the difference between a transgender child and a transgender adult?
Well, would you like to tell me what transgender
What kind of question is that?
is for a start?
It's
So let's
someone who has
define
gender defining.
Who has what?
It's somebody who doesn't define their gender by their birth.
One of the defining
Okay, so what is a gender in that it's innate to a person?
traits of far-right ideology is the belief that minorities can and should be marginalised.
Far-right ideology. Just, fuck it, man. You haven't established that trans constitutes a minority, but okay.
For the supposed
Or whether Steve is actually marginalising anyone.
good of the majority. When you're seen to be cracking down on some kind of inconvenient outgroup, it creates the illusion.
Yeah, like kids not being able to consent is actually a good argument for transgender kids not existing. Because transition is something you need to consent to, but then not everyone bases trans around transitioning. The problem is they base it on your gender identity being different to your sex, and that's nonsense. So,
illusion of action, and it's far easier to demonise people for their gender, their sexuality or their beliefs than it is to fix the trains or balance a budget. And that's why so many right-wing culture warriors seem weirdly obsessed with which bathroom someone should poo in.
okay, we should be focusing on other things.
Another classic right-wing trick is just to round down the numbers. If fewer than 2% of the population is transgender, then surely that's almost zero. And wouldn't it be easier if that awkward little minority just conformed by ceasing to exist? Stephen is desperate for this kind of erasure
Where has he said any of this?
because it's easier than actually winning the debate. And he's just waiting for someone louder, stronger and more confident to come along and validate his ideas. And if he can't have J.K. Rowling, he will settle for the first wacky guy who agrees with him, no matter
Is he going to show any of this? Like, what is this example going to be? It looks like about 5 seconds long.
how unhinged or incoherent they sound.
I actually heard that there are people who are really, it's not just like made up
Like, all this erasure shit. When does he say any of this? Oh, because there's not very many of them. We can just erase them. They don't exist. When does he say any of this?
people are kind of in between the genders. That's many, yeah. But it's like less than 1%. But you know, it could be 1%.
Like, what is this argument even about? Is it about erasing them? Or is it about why are we defining the rest of humanity based on like a tiny percent? Because that is another problem with the word cisgender. That's what that means. It's an alternative to transgender. Therefore, we're defining the entirety of humanity based on transgender people. Doesn't make much sense, does it? But like, he starts talking about erasure and stuff. It's not very clear what the context of this argument he's making is.
Yeah. But that shouldn't make all the 99% do what is what. Imagine we only...
Oh no, he literally fucking says it. Because you are defining the rest of humanity by using the term cisgender and saying that it's contra to trans. Okay, so almost everyone in the world has this prefix to who they are that means not trans. We need to specify that people are not less than 1% of the fucking population. That's ridiculous. I was bringing up intersex. Okay. See, the framing is so fucking crazy. So this is more about sex isn't like not binary because like a few people exist that make it confusing.
To walk on a stick because 1 out of 100 walks on a stick.
Yeah.
Stephen claims that he follows the science wherever it leads.
Yeah, so that was completely fucking terrible faith. He made up a bunch of arguments on his behalf and showed something that didn't really explain what you're saying.
But reality doesn't seem to go in the direction that he wants. Categories blur, ambiguity creeps in, definitions shift, and even the most basic terms like male and female start to get messy when you
They're not messy at all.
actually look at how biology works.
Yeah, I have looked at it extensively. It's still not that fuzzy. It's still not that difficult. Sex is a binary. Really, if you don't think so, it's because you think there's a different categorization than your reproductive role. And also, you probably believe in this idea that a category can't be valid unless it accounts for every single person on Earth, which is just ridiculous.
So instead, he leans on moral panic. He needs trans identities to feel like recent corruption, something unnatural that had been imposed from outside. But if gender diversity predates TikTok or Tumblr or whatever else he blames, then it's hard to pin it on some recent moral collapse.
Well, yeah, plenty of people pin it on like academics like Judith Butler and shit like that.
I think that's why he keeps circling back to children. It's a way of avoiding having to make a coherent argument. If kids are
Or he cares about the fact that children are being medicalized when they're too young to consent for that.
learning about trans people, then in his mind it must be indoctrination. This information must be contained in case the kids recognize themselves in what they learn and become trans. So his fear isn't about gender, it's about losing control of the narrative, of the language of the next generation, because it's going to be a world where kids get ideas without permission from his generation. Kids are growing up and changing in ways that Stephen hasn't approved.
No, they're changing in ways that is arguably very bad for them. And some of them are realizing it's bad for them after they've done it, and they can't change back. Like, does this person know anything about detransitioners? Has he ever listened to a detransitioner? Has he listened to any of these young women coming out who got mastectomies, have like deep voices? They started at like fucking 14, and now they're in their early 20s, if not late teens, realizing that it wasn't right for them, and now they've gone through a bunch of like steps to change their bodies forever that they're not happy with anymore.
So if one of your children came up to you, if one of your children came up to you and said, "Oh yeah, I want to be a girl," well, how would you? What
would I say?
Yeah, what would you?
I want to be a girl. Well, you can't be a girl if you're a boy.
I would have said, at first I'd say, where did you get that from? Did you hear it at school? Or
School.
Yeah? Did you hear it at school, or did you hear it on Tumblr or TikTok or YouTube, anywhere like that? Because it's full of trans influencers.
Stephen James argues that gender is immutable because sex is immutable. And he doesn't actually distinguish between those concepts, which is probably where his confusion.
He has that crazy stat. Yeah, it's like fucking, it's like he's worse than Helen Weberly. Like these are the eyes of a killer.
Starts. But this goes beyond confusion. What's odd is his fixation. Most people don't spend their weekends fretting about other people's gender. This is
Yeah, I don't think he's trying to argue that he's just like most people, though, is he?
weird behaviour, even by the standards of right-wing YouTube influencers.
Transitioning is also weird behaviour. Is it bad?
And even those who don't fully understand it tend to just shrug and move on. But Stephen can't let go. He's out there again and again with his
Yeah, most people, when they see this bizarre shit that's being pushed on kids, just shrug and let it happen. He's not willing to shrug and let it happen. What a terrible person.
Placard and his same old lines, filming strangers, picking fights. And all of it is about something that, just for the most of us, isn't that important.
So because it's not important to you, it shouldn't be important to him?
So why does Stephen care so much? Why this compulsion to confront? Maybe Stephen isn't really worried about the children or the bathrooms or even women's powerlifting. Could this all be some kind of projection? Maybe.
Wow. Fucking pop psychology. Psychoanalyzing someone you've never met. Wow. Always comes back to this, doesn't it?
Maybe he's worried about himself. Maybe he's like the man who loudly insists that he is very heterosexual while...
Okay, maybe he's not any of those things. What use is this segment of the video?
...whilst privately jerking off to gay porn. Because if Stephen truly believed that gender doesn't exist, he wouldn't be panicking about rainbow trains and trans TikTok. He would get on with his life. But he doesn't, and he can't.
Well, no, because he sees something that he doesn't think is real being forced on children. He's not happy with that. Not difficult.
He needs to keep returning to this subject again and again. He's like a man trying to drown something out.
Yeah, this isn't normal behavior either. Why are you so obsessed with a guy that goes out talking to people about kids getting filled up with hormones? We can all go on this fucking tangent.
A young kid said, "Mummy, Mummy, look, it's the Pride train." And there was an intercity train, Manchester to Piccadilly, and it was emblazoned in all the colours of the rainbow. And I'm just wondering, like, that kid got really excited, and I'm thinking, does he really understand what the Pride is? He didn't, he was too young. But it's enticing, isn't it, for the kids? It's really enticing.
Do you get the impression?
That's an extremely basic point. They're using all these, like, flashy, bright, vibrant colours. It's going to appeal to kids. It might make them want to be part of something that is supposed to be something you're part of because you were born a certain way.
That the kid in that story is Stephen. He's talking about himself. Trans as a prefix, it means through or across. It comes from Latin, and the same root word gives us words like transport, transmit, and transcendental. All ideas.
Anyone can do this. Anyone can do this. Anyone can watch someone say something about someone else and be like, maybe he's really talking about himself.
That suggest movement, growth, and change. And I suppose that is what the so-called trans ideology really gestures at. The radical and deeply human idea that we aren't all fixed, that we can imagine a version of ourselves that is different, maybe richer, kinder, or better smelling, or maybe even more out.
Nah, this is bollocks, mate. I think you know this is bollocks. That's why you've got this look on your face the entire time.
Outwardly aligned with who we believe we are on the inside. Stephen James, however, that we can imagine a version of ourselves that is different, maybe richer, kinder, or better smelling.
Anyone can imagine any of these things. The difference is most people understand that imagining something that is not reality.
Or maybe even more outwardly aligned with who we believe we are on the inside.
Like, what does that even mean? To go wear the clothes you want to wear then? Wear the hair you have at the length you want to wear it, assuming you have enough to do so. Like, express yourself how you want. But like, why fill up children with hormones? Why even put so much stock into this gender shit in the first place? Why not scale that shit back? Stop telling men that, oh, well, if you want to be a ballet dancer, that's feminine, that's woman shit. Stop telling women that, oh, you want to be a car mechanic, that's masculine. That your gender is like part male now. Isn't that the way?
Stephen James, however, represents the opposite. He clings to the idea that once you have been sorted, once the hat has declared which house you're in...
Well, specific to sex, yes, because that's how sex works. You haven't made a good case for sex being mutable. I have not changed my sex. I'm a post-op transsexual. I was born male. I have not changed my sex. There is no mechanism by which I can change sex. Certain different species have a mechanism. Do you know why they have it? For the purposes of reproduction, because sex is about reproduction.
That's it. You're fixed. You are what you are forever, and you have to live a life.
Like, the whole point that you're either a male or a female and that's it. The whole point of that, when applied like with a gender critical kind of belief system, is that that's the only part that is defined. And that the rest of you should be like cast free from gender and can do what the fuck you want. Like, that's the point of like gender critical. I don't know how much Steve aligns with that kind of thing. I don't know how much of a gender abolitionist he is. But like, that's truly what a lot of people are saying. And that's what I think as well. Like, you don't really get a say in what sex you are. When it comes to gendered traits, yeah, you can do what you want. And arguably that means that gender shouldn't really exist. Arguably that means that we shouldn't consider someone more like a woman if they have long hair or wear certain clothes, or more like a man if they have short hair or wear certain clothes. But people like this want to enforce gender and like hold it up and treat it as some like super important thing.
Life exactly as prescribed by your assigned house, never questioning the logic that put you there in the first place. In his world, there is no room for reinvention, no opportunity for growth.
I don't think this is true whatsoever. I think you're like massively essentializing what he's saying. I think you're stretching the shit out of what he says.
And we have to wonder, where did Stephen James get these bizarre anti-trans ideas from? What turned a man from
J.K. Rowling?
Ordinary pursuits like drinking in the local pub to this creepy street corner crusade?
Why is it creepy? What's creepy about what he does?
If we take Stephen's theory that identity can be corrupted merely by watching the wrong kind of media, could those hours spent in the company of Dumbledore, Hermione, and the Weasley twins have a...
Yeah, your sex is what you are, not who you are. Very, very much so. That's the whole point. People say that, like, oh, you're saying that someone is fixed to this idea, and that's who they are. No, it's not who they are, it's what they are, for sure. Who you are as a woman can be about a million fucking different things. Who you are as a man can be about a million different things. And that's what we all normalize in society, which would mean bringing down, like, the influence of gender on society, like, necessarily. Because part of gender is saying, this is what you ought to be like if you're masculine, if you're male or female. If you're male, then you should be masculine. If you're female, you should be feminine. That kind of thing.
Affected Stephen. Even his way of dressing.
And then therefore, if you're a male and want to be female, feminine, then you're trans. Well, that's not really how it is.
It looks like he's some kind of cosplay from the Ministry of Magic. Stephen, where did you get these ideas from? Did you hear it at school, or maybe on Tumblr or TikTok or even YouTube or anywhere like that? Because these days I hear that social media is full of creepy anti-trans influencers.
Wow, well done. He said a thing earlier and then you just said the same thing back at him. Wow, that makes you sound like an original thinker.
But here's the tragedy of Stephen. Unlike those hundreds of Harry Potter fan theory channels, almost nobody watches Stephen's channel, except of course people like me, people appalled by what he stands for.
Who gets more? This isn't even true. Read his fucking comments. Read your comments. You're fucking delusional, bro. You're like actually nuts. Who gets more views, I wonder? Because like this guy, he's got a lot of subscribers. I have a feeling he deleted loads of content. So 11K. Some of these are like quite low. 1.6, 4.5. 50K on this one. 29K. 7.5, 18K, 10K. 16K, 17K. By the way, he never mentioned this interview, did he? Never mentioned him talking to this Dimitri Lucifer Rodriguez person. Never mentioned that at all. Doesn't want to have conversations. What the fuck's this, bro? What the fuck's this? Really wants to be the next John Oliver. It kind of comes across that way. Like he's, for a channel with 20.7K subscribers. And I'm pretty sure that's like shot up. Like, we're rarely dipping below 5-figure views at points. What views is this person getting? 310, 1.6, 4.4, and he paid for a bunch of these, by the way. 4.8, 1.6, 14K, wow, well done. Getting a few more. 35K, 13K, 17K, 26K. Like, they have similar viewership, if anything. And he has way, way more subscribers.
Stephen is irrelevant, and not even the woman that he has devoted him.
He's irrelevant? His fucking sub count is shot up, bro. If he's irrelevant, what the fuck are you?
Himself to knows or even cares that he exists. It must be hard for Sue, knowing that she will always be number 2
Concern trolling.
In Stephen's life. She must be a very sad, lonely...
Concern trolling.
Teapot. And what...
That's actually quite sexist, to be honest. Go after someone's wife as if they're an extension of that man. I think that's a bit sexist, to be honest.
Whatever kind of vessel you might personally identify with, whether it be a teapot, a coffee pot, or a set of pots and pans, consider yourself welcome. Even those of you who identify as male or female. I know that's quite conventional, but you are all welcome in the place where we like to discuss the aftermath of these Mind of Steel episodes. It's called Mind of Steel Chat, and it is a Telegram group for people.
Oh, is this what he invited me to? Hang on, I'll show you in a minute. He replied to my comment.
Who feel aroused in some way by the words that I have just uttered. Perhaps you feel rage. Perhaps you think I'm wrong. If you feel emotions as a result of things I've said, come along to the channel and tell me what you think, and I'll probably be there to disagree with you violently and publicly. Until next time, I'm sure I will have some other artifact of truth constructed for you and humbly offered.
Artifact of truth? Well, you misplaced this one because I don't fucking hear it anywhere. You literally thought this guy that he talked to at one point was a trans man because they said they were a trans man. You actually watched the full video. He ain't no fucking trans man.
Via this means of a YouTube channel, which I beseech you to watch. And until then, please, why don't you hit the like button, because it would make me so happy. Or in fact, if you feel other emotions, hit any other button. I don't even care if you hit thumbs down.
Yeah, this video is fucking moronic. I don't know why you would make something like this, let alone pay for it to be put out to a wider group of people.